Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts Whiskey and Sweet Tea discuss film from the unpretentious perspective. Come one, come all to the Found Footage Film Festival. Screening now, the horror film The Last Exorcism. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, please be advised that spoilers are ahead.
Welcome back, heathens, to another episode of the Found Footage Film Festival.
I love that name so much. But I'm a sucker for alliteration, so,
Yeah, this one's a little bit more supernatural than our last episode. Very excited to hear what you think of it. But before then, we just thought we'd talk a little bit about how the year's going with movies and some of the films that are not doing so well that we both think are worth checking out. And we're going to keep it as spoiler-free as we can. Not going to disclose too much. But I just thought it was worth it because there hasn't been a lot of movie news. The biggest thing, at least as of recording right now in the news, was the whole Met Gala thing. And everyone's mad at all the celebrities and people are goofing on different outfits.
That happens every year with the Met Gala. I'm kind of just like, really, does the Metropolitan Museum of Art still need $75,000 from every single person who shows up? I think they're well funded now. I think they're good.
It's one of those, things, neither of us are celebrities, but it's kind of,
speak for yourself.
When I hear that you have to get invited and then you have to pay that much money, it's like, is it worth it really? Like, I mean, I guess it might be fun if you want to dress up and stuff, but yeah, at least currently I wouldn't be able to afford a ticket. But yeah, well, we'll get into the, normally, and for anyone who is new to the show, we have the last couple of years made our finale or sort of our premiere of every year to be sort of a summation of all the movies that we've seen the past year, and we, give scores to them. I don't think we need to do that so much. I just think this is worth talking about because all the time, and I'm sure you get this all the time too, there's always types of people, they always complain about different kinds of movies.
Right.
But all the time, I remember even some of my friends when I was like a teenager, like in my early 20s, talking about, there's no good movies anymore. No good movies come out. And I feel like that's still a type of person that is very much alive and well. And what frustrates me is these people don't seem to really seek anything out. They just kind of go with the surface level, whatever Hollywood is telling them to go see.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do that, you're going to think that there's no good movies because, the industry certainly wants to promote the same stuff over and over again. But
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean,
and so far there's been so many like good movies that are bombing at the box office. I just thought this was worth a full segment because, some of them are streaming now. Some of them are just barely hanging on in theaters. But so far, this is just, in general, I think this has been a really good year for movies. I think a lot of good stuff has come out, more so than last year for sure. But it's kind of becoming the year of the bomb, if you know what I mean. Bomb as in box office bomb, and bomb as in very good.
No, yeah, what's really interesting about this is, like you said, there's not even just like good written and good produced movies. There's like unique movies coming out. It's like, hopefully, I think I finally got you to go see it, and I'm gonna talk more about it at the end of the year. But I was super stoked to see Lisa Frankenstein. That looked quirky, it looked different. I took two different people to see it. They both thought it was hilarious, and they watched. And then, but it's like it didn't do well. I think I wanted to see it like 3 weeks later, and I couldn't find a theater that was showing it anymore.
Yeah, and I think you sent me the trailer. I feel like you sent it to me, and I saw it independently around the same time. But I was intrigued. One, Diablo Cody, you had forgotten. It was kind of right around the same time we were talking about Juno, back when we were doing Lars and the Real Girl.
Right.
But it was just funny because it's like, oh wow, I haven't heard of her doing anything in a really long time, and here she wrote this movie. And then the other notable thing was that it's Zelda Williams directing, and I believe it's her directorial debut. So that's exciting. It's Robin Williams' daughter.
I didn't know that.
Robin Williams' daughter, Zelda Williams, who is named after the video game, directed Lisa Frankenstein. So this was her as I said, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's her directorial debut. At least it is as far as like a widely released feature film. So those were the two things that really made my ears stand up when I saw the trailer. And like you, I went to see it. And like you, I thought it was really good. I thought, I'm going to try not to spoil anything, but one thing that's not really a story spoiler, but just something I thought was a good it was Diablo Cody. The great thing about her, and the thing that makes her so grating sometimes, is she is a pop culture nerd.
Yeah.
And she did the same thing she did in Juno with this movie, except she sort of pivoted the interests of the main character to like horror and like different type, like 80s, like The Cure and things like that. But it's still very much got her DNA as far as like referencing a lot of things. But she is a horror fan. Like she made that known when she wrote Jennifer's Body. But one kind of attention to detail I noticed with Lisa Frankenstein that I really liked, and it's more faithful to the film than it is to the book, but I like that the Frankenstein's monster in the film does not have any dialogue.
That's right.
2 thumbs up to Cole Sprouse's performance, because that's a hard thing to do, but that was actually kind of something that's really famous about the film Frankenstein from the 1930s, and famously why Bela Lugosi turned the role down was because there was no dialogue from the monster, and he didn't want to do a role where he didn't talk. So that's where oh my goodness, why am I blanking on his name? Boris Karloff picked up the role and ended up kind of becoming the more famous monster movie actor of that era. And I thought that, again, I know that is Diablo Cody doing that on purpose because she's a big horror nerd like me. And I thought that was neat because, the monster could have been talking for the whole movie, but I like that pretty much up until the very, very end, just no words from him. And so, pseudo spoiler, I wouldn't really say that spoils anything from the story. I just thought that was a great detail, and it really made... Cole Sprouse had to work to make it work, and he did a great job.
Right, and I agree. And then another movie that I think we've talked about that isn't doing as well as I think it deserves is Fall Guy.
And I was surprised to hear that one's bombing.
My brother saw that when it premiered at South by Southwest, and he got glowing reviews. He thought it was great, and it's been getting critical praise. People really like it. But no one's seeing it. And, they're trying to say, it's because, the younger generation doesn't know the intellectual property. And I was just like, I knew of it. I didn't really know
I didn't know.
Yeah, it's based on a TV
what's
show
the
from
intellectual
the 70s.
Property?
It's literally a TV show, I think, from the 70s called The Fall Guy. It's literally about this crime-solving or bounty hunter. I forget what he does. He does different things. Crime-solving or bounty hunter type stunt guy. He's basically that's like his he's a stunt man, but like because they don't pay a lot or whatever, he takes on these other jobs as like a bounty hunter or like or a mystery solver. I forget what it was, but I actually don't think you need to see the movie to see the show to understand it, because I think just from the trailers it looks interesting enough on its own. I think it stands on its own is basically what I'm trying to say. I feel so bad because like it's just the taste of the moviegoer right now is no one's really kind of landed on really what the public is craving. And I know people think they know what the public's craving. I don't think anyone really does know what the public's craving right now. And that's why they keep going. And even like sequels and stuff aren't doing well, or remakes, or they're not doing well. So I don't think people know what the public wants to see right now. But I felt bad for Ryan. Oh, go ahead.
Well, the thing is, movies are doing fine. Dune Part 2, last I checked, it was over 700 million at the global box office, so it's still doing fine. I think it's still in theaters, even though I just got the Blu-ray. I just saw Challengers today. Literally, I'm like a month late on it, but that's still doing okay. It actually had a really big opening weekend. there's been plenty of like success stories so far this year. I just think it's interesting that a lot of movies that I have gone out to see and that are getting critical praise. Like that was the thing. Lisa Frankenstein was well reviewed. It's not just you and me that liked it. And same thing with The Fall Guy. And The Fall Guy, I got to say, I saw the trailer and I thought it looked really good. I'm going to try and see if I can see it before it's out of theaters. Partly because, I would very much like for it to do well, because it looks good. The trailer made it look good. Ryan Gosling's always great, and it looked like a funny concept for a movie. And again, I didn't even know it was based on a TV show. I just think that's a funny idea that this stuntman who does all these like really cool, crazy things. He's like trying to impress the director, and it turns out and this is all in the trailer, by the way. I haven't seen the movie so far,
right.
Like, yeah, I guess the lead actor in the movie he's doing stunts for is kind of a degenerate who's gotten himself into some trouble, and so he has to go find him, and put his life at risk with all these like seedy characters and stuff. That's funny. That's a good idea for a movie. And as you said, it's critically doing well. I kind of wonder if it's going to be a repeat of last year's Elemental,
right?
Which was that Pixar movie that was bombing, but it did okay enough to stay in theaters for like months and months and months, and then it eventually turned like a decent profit. I'm wondering if maybe the same thing will happen with The Fall Guy, because I don't know why it would continue to do poorly, especially right now. There's some good stuff out, but it doesn't really have much to compete with.
Right, because I'm looking at, I hopped onto my Santikos app, and so I'm looking at what's playing, and there's really nothing. I guess maybe you could argue that the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes might be like competition for it, but to me, not really, because it's not. That's more of a drama. I mean, it's an action drama, but like The Fall Guy looks like
it's also like
sci-fi.
That's been an interesting. I don't know how that's going to do, because that like just came out, I think today or yesterday. Did it come out last week?
I thought it came out last week, because I thought I heard the second week of The Fall Guy. Okay. They said it was clobbered by it.
Yeah, because the Fall Guy came out a few weeks ago. But the Planet of the Apes movies since 2011 have been interesting, because it was a prequel series.
Yeah.
And it was being basically helmed by Andy Serkis. It's really crazy that, like in the first movie, James Franco was one of the main actors. And boy, has his career trajectory changed in the last decade. So it's always funny to me to think that it was... Andy Serkis and James Franco were like the leading actors in the first one, but they haven't done like gangbusters, but they've done well, like very well, consistently well over the span of like a decade. Because that too, and in between the films, there was like years, like 3 or 4 years in between each film. So it's kind of crazy that those have been doing consistently well over the years. And But that's the thing. They don't have like a really rabid fan base. Yeah, they've just always been kind of like good movies to go see. So yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping I'm right in that it might be an Elemental situation where it does well later on. Right. But that's something that's had me scratching my head when I heard it wasn't doing well, because it didn't really have anything it was competing with at the time that I know of.
Yeah, like there's quite a few horror films out right now, and there's not really like anything like really kind of like lighthearted fun sort of like that. Now I could be wrong.
It's the calm before the storm, because kicking off summer is going to be Furiosa in like a week, and then from then on out, it's just going to be big movies all summer. This is probably the best summer that we've had since before the pandemic, because we've also got Twisters, we've got Wolverine and Deadpool, we've got like as I said, I saw Challengers today, and just seeing all of the posters, it's like, my goodness. I can definitely guess I am not going to be able to see every single movie coming out during the summer, because there's so much coming out. But it's exciting, because like it's been a while. I've on this show I've been saying I thought like 2019 was like the last really good year for movies because every genre had like an excellent a film representing it. For like historical war, you had like 1917. For like a period drama that's like led by women, you had Greta Gerwig's Little Women. You had for comedy Jojo Rabbit. In foreign film, which won Best Picture, you had Parasite. You had, for weirdos like me, The Lighthouse. Like, I could keep going.
I told you about The Lighthouse. I saw that, and I told you I still have no idea what it's about, but I really enjoyed it.
Well, again, I could just keep going. There was also like there was a sci-fi take on Heart of Darkness called Ad Astra that I'm sure a bunch of people have forgotten about. That was really good when that came out. It just, like, for me, 2019, it's great that it was such a good year because then we would have nothing for, like...
Right.
Well, not nothing. Like, stuff was still coming out, but it was such a good year for movies. And I feel like this year is, like, possibly going to be another year like that. Because it's not like there haven't been good movies coming out since, but it's just... crazy how many like really anticipated films or just even and we haven't even gotten to like Oscar season in the later part of this year.
Right,
I'm sure there's
right.
movies we don't even know about that are coming out.
The prestige / snobby portion of the year.
Exactly. My favorite season. But and I'm going to take the opportunity because and I will say when this episode comes out, obviously it'll be a week, maybe 2 weeks from when we're recording. But Lisa Frankenstein is currently available to stream on Peacock, and even for cheap people, in case you guys don't know, there is a free version of Peacock. You have to watch ads, but there's literally no excuse for you not to see Lisa Frankenstein, even if you don't want to spend money. So we
Not
both
sponsored.
Recommend it. Definitely want to check it out. The one I want to shout out, and I particularly want to shout this one out because a lot of the most vocal and annoying type people, I've kind of complained about the anti-woke movie critic in a lot of episodes, but it's because they seem to have a pretty decently sized audience, and they also seem to think that there are no good movies coming out. And so the film I really want to give a shout out to is Boy Kills World, which is a action satire film produced by Sam Raimi. And as soon as I found out it was bombing, I was like, well, it wouldn't be a Sam Raimi film if it wasn't... because the only movies that ever do well that he produces or directs are Spider-Man movies and Evil Dead movies. If he ever does... And then I guess the Darkman movies as well. But if he ever does anything different, they always bomb. And this is no exception. And the part of the reason I want to talk about this film as my little recommendation is that this film is exactly what these anti-woke movie critics are constantly bitching about that they want to see. It's offensive, it's violent, it doesn't have any like political topics being shoved down their throats. Like, it's just a fun movie. So far this year, I would say it is the funniest movie I've seen all year. The fight choreography is excellent. It's like on par with Monkey Man that came out a few months ago. And no one is talking about it, including these people. These people that are so tired of Marvel movies and so tired of, like, women in their movies or what. It's like, this is literally the movie you guys are constantly saying you want to see, and none of you have seen it, and none of you are talking about it or promoting it. And I find that so ironic and so funny because it's like, shouldn't you guys be using your platform to promote films you want to see? And I will say, like, I saw the trailer for this film. I don't know how the marketing has been because maybe a lot of people haven't seen it. Mm-hmm. But it's just strange to me that it's genuinely a good movie. And just like the other movies we've talked about, the critics liked it too. This isn't like, the woke, liberal movie critics saying that it's trash or whatever. The critics liked it. I liked it. Right. No one's seeing it. It's a Sam Raimi movie. What are you going to do?
It's kind of just sitting there.
But yeah, and I'd recommend you see it too. It's also like, I haven't had a reason to, it's funny. It's double funny because we're talking about a Lionsgate film in our review today, but I was also thinking like, oh man, I haven't really had a reason to praise Lionsgate since like the Hunger Games. For a while, they were kind of like
I haven't had a reason to praise Lionsgate since they put out the original box set of Moonlighting.
Yeah, like it's just funny because if you were talking to Teenage Whiskey, I was such a Lionsgate fanboy. Like they did what I am always saying indie studios like that get very profitable should do. You know, you find a horror franchise and you milk it until you have enough money to put money into other things. Right. Because Lionsgate famously was built by Saw. The same way New Line Cinema was built by the Nightmare on Elm Street films. So, as I said, Teenage Whiskey was a huge fan of Lionsgate because all the Saw movies I watched growing up. And then they went on to do things like The Hunger Games and other, like, they basically became like a AAA studio out of an indie studio, kind of like New Line Cinema. But I haven't had a reason to talk about them in a long time, pretty much since the Hunger Games. But yeah, this is a lot. Boy Kills World is a Lionsgate film as well. And you haven't seen it. I actually think you would like it. It's kind of a I'm not going to spoil it, but just the gist of it is the main character is trying to get revenge on a gangster who he believes killed his mother and sister. Mm-hmm. And so he's been training in the woods with like a shaman who's like teaching him kung fu and whatever. And what's interesting about the main character is he is deaf and mute. And so the movie is being narrated by his internal monologue, which is voiced by H. John Benjamin, who you know from Bob's Burgers.
Yeah. Oh.
So John Benjamin is playing his voice, and Bill Skarsgård, aka Pennywise, is the main character. And so it's like a martial arts film where he's like getting revenge on these gangsters, but it also takes place in this really wacky dystopian city where like the gangs are like running the city, and they're also getting sponsor deals from like sugar or cereal companies to like broadcast their culling it is insane. It is unapologetically stupid, but the fight choreography is great. The sense of humor is very like dumb, but also like it feels kind of like it's mixing like Kill Bill and the Hunger Games and making fun of both of them at the same time.
Right.
And it's got a really good twist at the end, and that's all I'll say about it. But yeah, anyone who listens to the show, if it's streaming when this comes out, or if you find a theater where it's still playing, 2 thumbs up from Whiskey to Boy Kills World.
Well, you know, if it's 2 thumbs up from Whiskey, I'm immediately not going to see it. I'm just kidding.
Well, it's you like Evil Dead 2. It's that kind of violence where it's like so over the top you can't take it seriously. Like that's kind of like Sam Raimi produced it. He didn't direct it, but it's that same kind of vibe where it's really violent but so over the top that it's just funny.
Which, riddle me this: why? Maybe you know the answer to this. Why is Bruce Campbell, which by the way I just found out was also in Sky High from when I was younger? Awesome.
Oh yeah.
Why is he voicing the character of Ash Williams in Call of Duty? Like, I didn't even know those properties were related.
Yeah, well, that's because Call of Duty, I feel like it's not just Call of like they had other characters. It's typical Activision. They're trying to because they have it's like Fortnite. It's like how in Fortnite there's like Rick and Morty and Homer Simpson as like playable characters, even though they have nothing to do with it's the same thing with I haven't really been tuned into the whole Call of Duty thing, but that's why Ash is in it, is because they're kind of trying to do the same thing where they have like recognizable characters that you can play as for no reason.
I was just like, oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That being said,
but
what are you drinking this evening?
Oh, great. And yeah, so shout out to those 3 movies. As of recording this, Fall Guy is still in theaters, so let's make some history. Let's actually let these movies not die. Check out Lisa Frankenstein. And yeah, so I am just keeping it simple. I was looking for something that might correlate with the movie, but you know, Uncle Dave's IPA from Discretion Brewing looked pretty good. Not typically an IPA guy, but, nice and flavorful. How about you, T?
Well, I've been, dear listeners, if you didn't know this, I've been super busy, which is why that's why there's been so many huge breaks and uploads and everything like that, because I have been moving. I have moved. I am now mostly settled, but because of that, I have very limited funds right now. So I went for, because I'm just like, I have no idea what to pair with this. I went to Target and bought like a $6 wine called Sun Pop. It's a Moscato, and I got it in the peach flavor. So that's what I'm drinking.
No, that sounds good. I mean, it's kind of this. I'm not exactly tight on funds, but kind of the same deal. Like I was thinking, oh, this takes place in Georgia. Maybe I could find like a
excuse you, it's Louisiana.
Wild turkey or something. Huh?
It's Louisiana.
Well, he's from Louisiana, but the exorcism is in Georgia.
Are you serious? This whole time I thought he just like drove like a few. I'm gonna be so mad if I was this dumb about this.
I forgot about. For some reason, I was just really paying attention, but I remembered that because I saw this on Monday, so it's been a few days. But for some reason, I remembered that detail. I think partly because I was still trying to think of like, what can I drink? What's like related to Louisiana or Georgia? But I remembered that specifically. But yes, so for anyone who can't read, we're talking about The Last Exorcism. It's probably been, well, I guess we still haven't finished it, so it might not be that long ago, but our last episode was Creep. We're doing a found footage pairing this with these last two episodes, and Creep was very minimalist, so I was kind of thinking, let's do something that requires a bit more special effects and planning, since Creep was basically like a really good improv movie. Like, it was just two dudes making stuff up in the woods and then cutting it together in a movie. This one was much more planned out. And crazily, I was surprised to see the budget. So Last Exorcism, it came out on August 27th, 2010, which is crazily my birthday, actually. So,
well,
I thought that was it. Interesting.
They needed some way to celebrate it.
Right? Maybe that's why I went to see, because I saw this in theaters years ago, and that's part of the reason I remembered it. And I think it was like the premise intrigued me, because the 2010s was like, the 2000s I feel like was kind of the torture porn years for horror movies. Like, that was what was popular.
Yeah.
And the later 2010s was kind of when you got like art house horror movies, but the early 2010s was paranormal fully. Like exorcist movies, ghost movies, like anything with spooky demon stuff was like what was working. And this was also right after Paranormal Activity made a big boom. So going into the budget, because Paranormal Activity is another example of, it did not cost a lot of money. I think it cost like $10,000 or something.
But like,
it was ridiculously
like a huge
cheap.
Profit, right?
Oh, super huge. It was like one of the highest grossing movies that year. So I was surprised to see that the estimated budget for this movie was $1.8 million. And it did fine. It grossed worldwide over $69 million. Nice. And this was, as I said, this was produced by Lionsgate. It was produced also by Eli Roth, who had gotten really popular in the early 2000s for his movies Cabin Fever and The Hostel 1 and 2.
Speaking of torture porn.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so, yeah, like, he's really into horror, and he still is, like, even after his, he did Green Inferno, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, I guess this guy was his buddy, or he liked the script, but Eli Roth produced it. Lionsgate was the, distributor. And this was directed by Daniel Stamm, who hasn't really made anything notable since this. He's done a lot of TV, but two movies that sounded familiar that he's done are Pray for the Devil and 13 Sins.
I've heard about those.
And then this was co-written by Huck Botko and Andrew Gerland, which Andrew Gerland makes me laugh because it sounds like Andrew, like Garfield, but you're saying it funny.
Oh, I just saw that
And
episode
the
of American Dad
one
last night.
fun fact that IMDb mentioned that I actually thought was funny. T, do you remember the scene where the director of the documentary gives the girl those red Doc Martens?
Yeah, what was the deal with that?
So I thought this was funny. The reason that scene exists is actually it spawned from the fact that the insurance company that was covering the movie wasn't going to cover the movie if Ashley Bell, the actress who played that girl, was running around the farm in bare feet.
I mean,
So
I feel like with her character being a living, breathing person, there would have been other reasons for her to have shoes other than to make a big scene where she hands over Doc Martens.
I guess I don't know. That's what they said on IMDb. Maybe they wanted like super proof or something for the insurance company. Also, you could have lied. Like they could have put that scene in there and then still had her running around barefoot. I don't know. That I thought that was kind of a funny little tidbit that I saw on IMDb. And then the two actors I felt like mentioning, Ashley Bell was the girl who's possessed, and she's doing quite well for herself also. She does a lot of voice work for like cartoons and things like that. And then Patrick Fabian was our exorcist. But getting right into it, what do you think, T? I had a feeling, because The Exorcist is one of our favorite movies of all time, both of us. I don't, I wouldn't claim that this comes anywhere close to The Exorcist, but as far as like an exorcism found footage movie, the premise of this one is what got my attention when I went to see it, and I remember explaining the premise to you before we did this, and it sounded, you were intrigued as well. So how did you feel about the film?
I really liked most of this movie. I enjoyed most of this movie. And then there were parts that I was just like, really?
So what do you think worked and what do you think didn't work?
Well, I really like the juxtaposition of this guy setting out to disprove exorcisms. I think it's weird, though, that he's like, I mean, he's essentially going to ruin his entire career by putting this movie out. But he has this weird reasoning for doing it that doesn't exactly line up. I mean, it does, but it doesn't with other stuff involved. But like I said, what I think really worked about this was it was just a completely different approach to an exorcism. Like usually it's not. I mean, I guess you could argue that The Exorcist is like he looked at this, but he actually, maybe I'm wrong. I think maybe that is what works about. Okay, hold on, back up. Let me rephrase this.
For anyone, we always recommend that you watch the movie that we're talking about, but just like as a recap and the premise I'm talking about. So this is a found footage exorcism film where the premise and the reason it's called The Last Exorcism is that our hero is a preacher who was brought up in the church. Like he was a child preacher. He was kind of a novelty act as a kid. He is... he does believe in God, and he does, he's not like anti-religious or anything, but he's very much a showman, and he's a little bit put out by the fact he could say just about anything and people will eat it up. That's kind of his opening in the film. He's like, oh, watch, I'll preach a banana bread recipe, and they'll just, believe everything I say. And so it's not so much like he thinks God isn't real as much as he's just kind of finds it disturbing, I think, that like people are so suggestible. Which, he lives in the Bible Belt, so obviously, but so the reason, so he's been doing exorcism since he was a kid, and it sounds like he probably did at one point believe in it, and they make a point to show that his family has like this demon book of like demons that you can find and categorize and stuff. So I think it probably started out kind of as he believed it, but just in the same way that he's been sort of put out by how everyone just blindly takes everything he says at face value. I think he started doing it more as like a therapy kind of thing. Like if they believe there's a demon and they believe I exorcise the demon, then it helps their mental health I guess, is kind of the vibe I got from the way he was describing it.
Approaches it more from the fact that it's not even usually, because I think in like the original Exorcist, if I remember correctly, Father Karras really believed that this was mostly the result of mental illness. But in like this case, I feel like he doesn't even believe it's mental illness. He kind of more believes it's like psychosomatic almost.
Yeah.
And and he thinks and I guess previously it had worked by offering a placebo, his fake exorcism with all the drama, would work. And, to an extent that is true. So, like I said, I thought that was interesting. What I really liked about that is it kind of shows his whole process, the setup and everything. I thought that was pretty good. I thought that was really interesting.
Absolutely.
I thought that was good. And then what also I think kind of worked in this case was they didn't exactly show, or I mean, I guess they kind of do towards the end, or really talk about what the inciting event is, like how the infestation begins, because it's usually infestation, then it's oppression, and then it's possession when it comes to demonic entities.
It's the ending. The ending is the most.
I think we kind of join this story sort of in the middle between oppression and possession.
This movie, as I said, I'll get more into this as we continue to talk, but it's funny. I hadn't seen this in a while, and I did not know that the budget was over $1 million. But what is kind of interesting pairing this with Creep is they're almost sort of opposite movies. Creep was done for no money, and it was just two friends basically making stuff up. Whereas this one, there was a lot of planning behind it, and frankly, I think the writing is for the most part pretty good. The ending is where it gets messy, and we'll get into that once we get into the ending. But so getting back to the priest, I think so part of his motivation, so we hear early on the reason he's not doing exorcisms anymore is specifically we do find out he has a son, and his son has a disability. He has hearing aids, and I think he might have some other things going on. But there was a specific incident in which an autistic boy was killed during an exorcism, at least in the fictional world. Yeah, although it did kind of remind me.
That does.
What I don't.
Oh. I'll let you finish, but I'll kind of go into more of kind of like what my knowledge and the history sort of this topic is. But yeah, go on.
Well, one thing, and maybe I should have done some research on this to remember what it was. You're into true crime. You're probably going to remember this story as well. But the first thing that came up in my mind while I was rewatching this, because I had forgotten about that little tidbit about the autistic boy dying during the exorcism, wasn't an exorcism, but there was a very famous case of a girl with behavioral problems who was taken to a type of therapy where it was supposed to be like she was being reborn.
Right.
And is this ringing a bell? I'm going to keep describing it, but
it does.
The idea was
not enough for me to really kind of describe it, but this does sort of sound familiar.
So what happened in that case, this girl died because she was essentially suffocated to death. The idea was that she was supposed to burst out of the womb, and this unlicensed therapist was basically like the mother was holding her down, a bunch of assistants were holding her down, and she was supposed to fight off all of these fully grown adults, and it was all about her fighting to get out of her mother's womb and be born again. And it was all just pseudo-scientific BS, but they ended up suffocating this girl to death, and it was very messy. I think when they removed all of the covers and stuff from her, she had soiled herself and thrown up and all this. It's a nasty story, but it's funny because it's not an exorcism. It's something masquerading as psychology or pop psychology. But that story, and I wonder, again, I should have done some research. I usually do movie research for this. I should have looked up when that occurred, because that actually made me wonder while I was watching this. I was like, I wonder if that actually inspired this, because it was kind of a famous thing that happened when it happened. Yeah. And then I saw it on some YouTube true crime thing. Someone covered it, and I had forgotten all about it years later, and it came up again. But that's what that reminded me of. And so that is where the priest is motivated. I'm not going to do this anymore. And more so, I am going to demonstrate how it is faked to expose the whole exorcism industry, if you will, so that another innocent child is not killed because they have a disability, and their disability might be interpreted as them being demonically possessed.
Yeah. So I really like that. I kind of thought that was interesting. That was kind of interesting. The way it was, the way the story was laid out with him, it kind of reminded me of like an X-Files episode. Actually, a couple of them. There's one. Well, speaking of the ending, which we'll talk about more later, but there's actually one with a chicken processing plant where there's a small town, and I forget what it's the chalk something weird name. It's a chicken factory, and they have a cult that puts their victims in the chicken that's processed. There's that one. Then there's another one, speaking of fake things, which I forget what the plot was, but they're looking for this boy actually does have the actual ability to have a legitimate stigmata condition. And so they're trying to find, if I remember, somebody else that has a similar condition, and they keep finding all these, like you said, these shaman and these fakes and stuff. And of course there's somebody else who's looking for them too. So they keep finding dead, I forget, I don't even know what the term to even call them is, but these frauds. But it did sort of remind me of that, but I thought it was interesting. I really thought it kind of reminded me also a little bit of like Poltergeist too, because at some point they realize something's going on here and we need to figure it out. And I do like that for the most part. It always toes the line between this could be the effect of real world things, but then every time they did that, you're kind of like, okay, I totally get that something weird or bizarre would happen, and that's unexplainable. So I thought that was kind of cool to kind of do this push and pull with your expectations as far as what is the cause of this. So that's what I thought kind of really worked about this. I thought the showman guy, I thought he was kind of hilarious, especially towards the beginning, because like I said, the catalyst for him doing this, I mean, he hears about this what is it called? He hears about the, like you said, this case about this boy being killed, which has happened on more than one occasion in history, usually by, I want to say usually because I don't know for sure, but it's usually in instances where it's an unapproved exorcism. And again, I can only speak from the Catholic Church perspective, because that's all I know. But what the part that I thought was just so funny is when he says, "Oh, I'm doing this because now they're doing this," and he has this newspaper article. Vatican announces, like, it almost made it seem like it was like a mail-in course to become an exorcist. And I'm like, okay, first off, we have several issues here, just to dive briefly in the history of exorcism. So the church has gone through many iterations. One of the main ones being the exorcism rites were reformed in 1614. And then I believe they were once again reformed in Vatican II. With Vatican II, because I just realized you don't know what that is. Vatican II is what happened in the 60s, and it's where a bunch of the bishops met with the Pope, and they kind of made decisions concerning reforms of church rights and things. It's a closed thing, and it lasts for like a couple years. It was a big deal, but yes, I think that they reformed again in Vatican II. But what's interesting about that is in the actual rites of the exorcism, they actually, one of the things is they actually require two things. One, the person has to be checked out to have an exorcism be an official exorcism and done safely in the Catholic Church. It actually is in the rite of exorcism that you have to, one, get them checked out by a mental and physical health professional to make sure, one, that this isn't a mental illness, and two, to make sure they're in good physical health to go through an exorcism. So I thought that was, and then during the exorcism process, there also has to be a medical professional present. So I thought that was pretty funny when I was like, seriously, that's what you think we do now? Got it. It was like just the funniest thing because it kind of made, like I said, it made it seem like anybody can like join the course and we can all become exorcists together.
The interesting thing. So first off, I do think the main character, this pastor, he's interesting because I don't think he's a bad guy, but I do think that he's a little bit in denial of this not being like a bit of an ego thing for him. Mm-hmm. He's got kind of a savior complex, and you really see that near the end of the film that we'll talk about later. Because I do think he is earnest about him not, wanting to expose so that, kids with like disabilities or mental illness are not killed in an exorcism. I do think he is serious about that, but I do think that there is kind of an aspect of his personality where he wants to be seen as like a hero. I think that's kind of because good characters need flaws, and I think that is his flaw because you see this throughout the movie too, where there's multiple points. We talked about this in Creep, where the audience is like, "Don't go into the barn." There's so many instances in the film where he should just peace out, but he just keeps pressing on, and I think a lot of that has to do with his. He was acting
like Olivia Benson from like SVU. I was like,
yeah.
Dude,
exactly.
Well, and then then there was some reason, and it's like pretty far in the movie when the director Iris, she says something. I'm like, come on, Iris, pigeons learn faster than you, because it's like nobody's ever heard the phrase, and I don't know what is it again. It's when you have eliminated all that is impossible, then whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. It's like I think that's Sherlock Holmes actually, but anyway,
yeah,
it's like at some point, y'all should have figured this out. I mean. Everybody else can see what's going on. Of course we are. And I say that because in a found footage setting, for the most part, we are privy to the same information that the characters have. Now, there are exceptions, like in this case, when she wakes up and takes the camera for some reason, and kills the cat. They don't see that happen. Actually, they do because they watch the footage later. So it's like we all have the same information.
Yeah, there's some really good choices made also with the found footage. Just with what you were saying earlier also about the Catholic Church and its practices. One, I don't think the director Sam, or the writers, excuse me, because it was not written by the director. I don't think that they were really informed on the Catholic Church, and also secondly, I don't think they needed to be, because I feel like this was more, that's his motivation. Like, oh, they're training more Catholic people to be exorcists or whatever. But I feel like what his character and what this movie is kind of more targeting are like the amateur exorcists. Because I'm sure you are well aware, for anyone who doesn't know, T is a practicing Catholic. Also our resident paranormal expert on the show. But the thing about the Catholic Church, which makes their exorcist stuff interesting and also less off-putting, is that they take it very seriously, and like you said, there needs to be a medical professional, and frankly they don't do a lot of exorcisms every year because it's such a they even talk about this in The Exorcist, and it's gotten more popular since that movie came out, but it's still kind of the same way where like you really have to prove that you are very seriously possessed for them to take you seriously. I mean, what I feel like this movie and what this character is based on more is those amateur exorcisms you see on YouTube by like Bible Belt evangelical Christians, where they have the Bible in their hand and it's my sword, die demon, it's going into your back. You know what I mean? Like those ones where they clearly don't know or care what they're talking about. There is no medical professionals, and they're often making a big spectacle out of it in front of their whole congregation. I think that is kind of what the character means to be. First off, I think that's the type of exorcist he was as a child and becoming a pastor. And I feel like whoever came up with the idea for this movie, that is kind of who they are more, critical of. Right. Or at least like they're trying to be critical of, or at least make you think maybe that there's something more to this.
And that's what made him frustrating, but at the same time super interesting, because like you said, it's almost like he never grew out of that spectacle stage. Like, even as he's realizing the harm that this can cause, he still never, I think, got out of that. Because even, again, we'll talk about the ending later, but even at the ending, it's like, really, I'm like, dude, really, what are you going to do? Really, with what he rolls out there?
Yes.
He's like, I will let you take this child. I'm like, dude, stop.
Well, and as I said, I think that is part of his problem, is that he needs to be the main character. It's the same, there's other ways of exposing this, but like being the star of a documentary and like saving the young girl, and I feel like that is part of his problem, is he's always been a performer at a young age. Like, he was like a pastor at 10. And even when he has good intentions, like, he's still kind of doing it to stroke his ego a little bit. Like, he saved the child from being, murdered by the bad exorcists that are just, delusional or whatever. But I wanted to pivot into talking about the actress, because much like Reagan in The Exorcist, you really got to have a nice, charismatic, sweet girl to contradict when the demon is possessing them. And I really liked Ashley Bell. I forgot all about her until rewatching this, but she's very good at being like very sweet and likable and pulling off the very naive, sort of like raised in a cage kind of personality that her character has.
She really,
and at the same time,
really kind of really sold that, homely, very sheltered, homeschooled, almost not even aware of what electronics are, kind of girl. She really sold that. That was an incredibly believable performance. And like when she's in her normal state, when she goes back and forth, but like, especially because she's in her normal state and she sees, of course it's the stuff that he's faking, but yeah, she's like genuinely like, oh my God, I've never seen this, I've only seen chickens give birth, sort of thing. I love
exactly
that she did a great performance as that.
She's really good. She's also, the thing you got to remember, kind of the same as the OG Exorcist. She had to play the demon as well, and finding out she's doing voice work nowadays was not surprising, because she's very good at flipping that switch and being scary. And I actually, again, I should have done more research. I was wondering if she actually did any of the contortions that she was doing in the film, because there was quite a lot of like it would have been hard to hide it being a stunt person, because there was a lot of times where it's like clearly her. So I wonder if she's double jointed or something, because it seemed like she was doing her own contortion work. But, she was super great, and just other things too. Like, I'm sure this was written into the script, but like when I talk about using the found footage in a way that's good at kind of adding some dimensionality to the audience being sort of a participant in it, I really like, because that's a thing you see in like good found footage movies, is making the audience like, people are aware when they're being filmed, and there's something really creepy about the character looking into the camera. And so the bit where she kills the cat is a little over the top for me, but just, having her have the camera is really scary, because you don't know what she's going to do when she's a demon, and the fact that she knows to turn the camera on, it's like, before whatever happens, it's a little scary, because you're like, oh God, what is she going to do? What is she going to film? Because the demon knows what a camera is, and it's doing its thing. And same thing, there's a bit that is so scary without being shocking or gory, kind of late into the film, where the cameraman is outside filming her while she's like talking to, it was either the priest or her dad, and she's like making eye contact with her dad while it zooms in on like a close-up of her face, and then it kind of like, it either pans away from her or he steps away from the doorway or whatever, but he does it again and she's looking at the camera.
Yeah.
And it's so, it's obviously planned and written in, but that's the sort of thing that, especially if you're doing a horror movie as a found footage, one thing to really just capitalize on the medium you're doing is to make the audience sort of a participant in what's going on. And it's just the simplest thing is like making the monster aware of it being filmed and aware that there is like someone watching it, and it watching back. Just psychologically, there's something really scary about that, and you don't need any special effects. You don't need any contortionists. You don't need, like, just something as simple as that.
Yeah. Contortion stuff is just, it's very gross looking to me. So it's just a very simple effect to pull off if you have the right actor and actress, and it was very effective.
Absolutely.
So what I will say is I really was before we get into the ending, but I was really like, as it was wrapping up, I was like, oh, this is a really good ending for this film. I kind of like this. It's so unexpected. And then it's almost like, I don't know, it's like the ending of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's like, oh, I forgot we were doing a horror film. We need to throw something else in here. Like it's in Once Upon a Time, it's like, oh, I forgot I'm Quentin Tarantino. I need to have a super disgusting, bloody scene in the movie somewhere. Because like I've always felt the ending of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood feels completely tacked on.
Well, so one thing I thought the film did really well, and it sounds like you think so too, is just the premise.
Yeah.
But one thing I didn't remember at all until rewatching it for this show. So one thing that the original Exorcist is really good at, and why everyone tends to like that movie, is that it treats, like, it doesn't take the demonic possession for granted. It earns that exorcism at the end by having it basically be a medical mystery for the whole thing.
Yeah.
And one thing that this film has in common with that is it never fully comes out and says it's a demon. You kind of suspect it is, but like up until the very end, which we will still get to, it kind of is like, but what if it isn't? And one thing that I actually thought made this really good, especially on the second viewing, is the alternative was equally scary to if she was demonically possessed, because getting into the spoiler territory,
right?
The movie, in a good way, this isn't really a medical mystery the same way as the original Exorcist, but the same way, nothing really happens that can't be logically explained by something. There's some things that are just really spooky, like her arriving at their motel and stuff, but nothing fully, no one's levitating or anything like that. Nothing just completely off the wall. This has to be a ghost or a demon. And the alternative to what may be happening is actually terrifying, because like in the original Exorcist, what might be happening is that Reagan might be sick. She might have some kind of brain tumor or maybe a mental illness. Like, she might be sick. Where I think this is really good is, even if you aren't sure if it's going to be really demonic possession, we have a girl whose father is a violent alcoholic who has some serious trauma from their mother dying, who's taken his kids out of school, who's taken his kids out of the local church so that he can keep them at home constantly.
Right.
And then later in the film, we find out that she's pregnant.
Right.
And so obviously, like, there's the whole demon baby kind of thing, but the alternative is equally disturbing, where this man is paranoid, he's delusional, and it's, deep south,
well, okay, I never thought
Sweet Home Alabama kind of stuff.
It's Alabama Mondays. But I never, even when I was watching, I always thought the father or the incest plot line was, I always thought that was a red herring. What I mean is what I thought was good.
With the ending.
I liked the concept of, oh my gosh, she was just so shamed from having a sexual experience. To me, that was what was really disturbing. Is like, but like, it makes total sense. And so when it was wrapping up like that, I was very impressed, and I kind of liked that. I'm like, oh, it's like it's kind of like The Witch. That's like a commentary on like female sexuality. I thought this was going to do, and I was like, ooh, I was about to praise this film for this. That's what I loved. I like that as a possible ending.
Yeah, we're in agreement. And I don't know if you... So, as I said, I have not seen this since I saw it in theaters in 2010. I remembered the premise and thought that was neat. I remembered thinking, wow, this was pretty good for a found footage film. And also I know you like Exorcist films, or The Exorcist, so to speak, so maybe this would gel with you. And rewatching it, it's like all these memories came pouring back to me because I hadn't seen this or thought about it really since 2010. And so, as like what I was saying before, I kind of, when you go into a film like this, especially, it was marketed just like all of those other exorcism movies from the 2010s. So you go in with the presumption that there is going to be a demon because that's what you paid for. So just like you, I also remembered like, oh, obviously the father, it's a red herring or whatever.
Yeah.
But like the longer the film went on, and especially during kind of the almost ending, which was great, where she misspeaks and says blowing job, which makes him think, well, a demon would know what that is. Why are you misspeaking? And just like you, I thought when I saw this when I was like 18 or 19, I was just like, whoa, this movie's genius. Like, it tricked me into going to see this movie where like there was no demon or anything, and it's actually like this perfectly logical explanation. It turns out the dad didn't do anything. And I was like very impressed with the movie as well. Still goes with what I was saying before where, I didn't really expect that the dad did anything. What I think I kind of mean is like, if the dad did something, that is an equally horrifying prospect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, even when I saw this the first time, like you, I assumed it was a red herring. But that's something I actually thought was kind of well done compared to the original Exorcist, where it's like, in The Exorcist, if Reagan was mentally ill or had, a brain tumor or something, that is also horrible. But at least, she has a loving family and they can afford to, like, get an operation or something. Whereas if the father had abused his daughter and was that crazy, that's disturbing in its own way, almost as disturbing as demonic possession. So I thought that was really good. But just like you, I also, you don't expect it to be the dad because it's too easy.
It's like he's too obviously nuts. It's not him.
Absolutely. So we're finally getting into the ending because it's worth talking about now. So the big twist is that, early in the film, the father's talking about how he took his kids out of the local church because they were, they weren't teaching the true word of God. And, you would think, oh, this is just some backwoods hick who, has his own version of the Bible he doesn't want his kids believing. And we even meet the pastor and his assistant, and they're just like these, friendly old Southern people.
Yeah.
And so the big twist is that they are actually a satanic cult. And that he was not crazy for taking them out of the church. Like, they are the reason that she was possessed, essentially. And that is a good idea. The ending is so rushed, and it's so...
But it's also just
0 to 100.
Like, as you said, the exorcism is earned in The Exorcist.
Exactly.
The cult in this was not earned at all.
No, it was not. And it happens literally within like 5 minutes. You learn about the cult's existence, and then there's the big climax with the demon baby. And it sucks because, frankly, having a turn back to it actually being demonic, I don't think is a bad idea.
Yeah.
And before, like, the bit where they go to... So the original assumption is that she had sex with a boy who works at a local diner. And they just assume that that's what's going on, and they're about to leave. But right before they leave town, the main character, our preacher, our pastor, he's like, let's talk to the kid. It's supposed to be this place, right? And they're passing this little diner. And then they talk to the kid, and you not only do you believe him, but like the he's gay. Like there's
physically
it didn't happen. Like, it's not just like the kid denying like, oh, nothing really happened. Like, he clearly would not have done anything.
The dude could not get it up for her.
That is such a good scene, and that is such a good holy shit moment.
Mm-hmm.
That it sucks that the rest from that point
it's
on,
almost
the
like
movie
if they'd
just
ended it
nose
there.
dives.
that would have
Yeah,
been
it's
good.
almost, it felt so rushed. And that's the thing is like, if this movie were like 20 minutes longer and it started with like them investigating and maybe they even find out like, oh wow, this pastor, he actually comes from this place and he was arrested when he was 19 years old for, you know, like maybe he was part of the Son of Sam murders, or like they could have
something
done
like that.
so much more and actually made this way creepier and had like an extra like real third act. And maybe it's a money thing, but yeah, no, it's such a shame. This movie is like almost perfect, almost genuinely a genius movie, but the ending is so, and that too. Also, so there's a moment in the film where they go into the girl's room, and there's like photos of all of them. Like the director of the documentary is like chopped into pieces. The main character is like, you know,
Consumed
his
in
silhouette
fire.
is in front of a fire holding up a cross, and the cameraman's head has been chopped off. And that also comes out of nowhere. Like that's something that could have just been built up, but it just sort of happens near the end, and then
But it's also,
oh
it's
no,
like,
it all comes true.
well, it's also it's like once it, like, so the ending is so rushed. It's like once you figure out what's happening, it's like none of that is interesting or scary anymore. It's kind of like it's kind of, they have this like prolonged, not prolonged, I guess it's not that long, but it's like after we see her get, you know, chopped up or whatever, it's like he is running and it's like, I don't know why I'm still watching this. I know what's gonna happen. It's
Yeah, and
it
no,
was
and
kind,
that's the other problem, right? Is now
it's like you
know
gave
what's
away
going to
everything that
happen.
was gonna happen. It doesn't make it ooh creepy. It's like, well, at this point now it's just like, okay, I'm just literally waiting for the runtime of the movie to end.
It's like if they had cut that whole concept out of her making art of things that are about, because they kind of they show you that it happened to the cat. She makes a picture of the cat being smashed to death. Mm-hmm. So you know, oh, she's like predicting the future that she's going to make happen, kind of. But like that is so, it's not interesting if you know what's going to happen. If they had cut that whole thing out and spent more time building up the cult, it would have been so much better. And like you said, it's not interesting when you know how everyone's going to die.
Right.
And
it would
also,
be different
I
if
remember
it was just
even
like gravestones, you know, with their names on them or something. You know, at least
Yeah.
there's something mysterious happening. I mean, I don't like this, but I know horror fans talk about, ooh, I like the kills, you know, the interesting ones or stuff. Well, you know, previewing the kills kind of kills that buzz, you know, for lack of a better
and that
phrase.
is no, and I don't even think a horror fan would argue that, because like you said, part of like the people who enjoy the kills is not knowing how it's going to happen. A franchise we have not talked about on the show, but is also kind of a slasher franchise. Maybe you've seen some of these, as the Final Destination movies.
Oh yeah, I've seen
And part
parts,
of
yeah.
what makes those kills fun and what makes those really suspenseful is you don't know how they're going to die. There have been plenty of kind of funny ones where it's really drawn out and then something really simple happens.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh no, I got shocked by a cord sticking out of my TV or something, like when all this other really scary stuff is happening. So no, I don't even think a horror fan would agree with that. Like it's not scary when you know how everyone's going to die.
Yeah.
And it's not even like, you could argue, I guess, that it's scary that she knows, but it's not that scary. And it kills any suspense. It's just a shame. And even to add on to that, you do not see any of the kills. The last you see of the preacher is him walking towards the fire, like in the picture. You don't see anything, like you kind of see the director being dismembered, and then, you know, there's like the POV shot from the cameraman's perspective of the boy, like whacking.
I mean, that's
him
the only
with
thing that was
a
creepy
hatchet or
about that
whatever.
is you find out the other kid's involved too.
Yes. No, and that's creepy as well. But it's a shame. The ending, it's just, we could talk about it forever, but like, I think we pretty much kind of hit the nail on the head. It's not earned. There is not really, I like the fact that there is a fake out exorcism right before the end, because that kind of is like what you expect is going to be the big climactic exorcism, is when she says blowing job and stuff.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like this movie, if they had made it just slightly longer, which it's under 90 minutes, and for that matter, I still find it strange that the budget is so bloated. I don't know why this was so expensive, because there's not a lot of special effects, really. The very end, like the bad ending we're talking about, had some CGI and had, that obviously cost a bit. But most of these actors are not super well-known people, or at least like A-list actors. Most of the film is, just people talking. I'd say like a good half of it is just, conversation. So I do not know why it costs so much to make this film. And right. Especially compared to Creep, which we talked about last time.
Well, the million probably went into that ending fire.
Right. Well, and that's the funny thing too, is like in researching this, there was a sequel that came out a few years ago, which is funny because it's the same thing with Creep. Creep also had a sequel a few years later. The difference is Creep, all of the same people were involved. With this, the director did not make The Last Exorcism Part 2. I don't think Eli Roth had anything to do with it. Maybe his name's attached. It seems like nobody was really involved in it, so it was just a crappy... And even like when I was researching it, it said that this movie was cut into The Last Exorcism Part 2. So that makes me think, they just made a bad sequel with like bonus stuff from this movie. So that's interesting. But like it's neat also that this did do well at the box office. 69 million is a lot of money. I think that's even more than Creep, because Creep did really well, but I think it was closer to like the tens of millions. Well, I mean, this is tens of millions as well, but like closer to like 10 million and below. I can't remember. It's been a while since we recorded. But yeah, it like every pairing we ever do on this show, we kind of picked the perfect two movies to pair. Because Creep was done for no money. It was not planned out. But because of the way they did it, they had room to grow and come up with new ideas. From what I understand, Creep 2 is actually well received. We haven't seen it yet. But it seemed to do about as well as the first movie. And I think part of that is they left so much room to grow. In our last episode, we talked about how that ending was really good, in that there's all these tapes of all of his other victims, and it's like, ooh, Creep 2 could take place in a different time. It could be before the movie. It could be after. Who knows? It just like planted the seeds of a potentially very interesting kind of like slasher character. Whereas this killed any kind of interest it had, but at the same time, it was very planned out. There was a budget behind it,
right?
Very talented people involved, and it also like did really well. So it's just, they're almost like polar opposite movies in the way they approached things.
Well, and then I just can't get over this ending, because it totally like just ruined this movie. It just ruined it. I'm sorry.
It does.
And I wondered if I felt this way. So when I was checking to see what I recognized one of the actors from, it's not who I thought they were. But anyway, when I looked it up, somebody on Reddit post, the ending of The Last Exorcism was completely necessary and doesn't deserve the hate it gets. I'm like, sir, what planet are you on?
No, Reed, do you have that? That could be a good, like, let's hear what they have to say, because that would be I still like this movie. I don't, we're gonna get into our ratings in a second here. I would say it didn't ruin the movie, like, because 90% of the movie is very entertaining, and it's very well put together. And like, that's the funny thing too, is like I said, it's like 5 minutes at the very end is just the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's like an hour and 20 minutes of it being pretty good. So like for me, it doesn't ruin it. It's just a shame, because this could have been a lot better than it was. But what does this person think about the ending? Because I would love to hear what they have to say.
Okay, so I am reading from the r/horror subreddit, and this is by user Gillette LaCroix. Don't laugh at people's name. That's mean.
I mean, it's not their... I would not laugh at someone's birth name. I'll laugh at their Reddit username. Okay. They made it up. I'm allowed to laugh at that.
So it says, in defense of the ending, because they go through the whole thing where they, synopsis, ending spoiler, they talk about people's criticism of it, and they say, in defense of the ending. I'm going to read exactly what it says.
Yes.
I get it. Confirming that the battle for her soul was real lines the Last Exorcism up with previous films of its like. Surely this was bound to disappoint many audience, but the ending was great for two reasons. One, it made logical sense when considering that Cotton's interaction with possessed Nell in the barn culminated in him rationally deducing that the demon's tempting offer to give him a blowing job, yes, essentially told him that if it was really a demon, it would know that the proper term for it is blowjob, and that not knowing this well-known lingo is something that a relatively innocent, naive, and disturbed young girl would fit, not an ancient, malignant, supernatural entity. Once this happened, that was it. We were led to believe that she was just ill. Audiences are correct. The ambiguity did end, but it didn't cease through the film's conclusion. It ceased during this scene. The only possible curveball ending we could have gotten after that, a crazy affirmation that it was real. I'm censoring some language there.
Yeah.
Two, the ending was super messed up, once again censoring, a seance that results in human sacrifice and the birth of an otherworldly, ungodly creature who is possibly the Antichrist, secretly propped up by the very people who deceived Cotton, the people whom he tried to help, whom seemed genuinely harmless. That's horrific. The film's ending still maintained its uniqueness in the subgenre because the protagonist / anti-hero didn't win, and the supernatural was confirmed to us in the most grisly way possible. I completely disagree.
So, not sorry for laughing at his name, but I think he misunderstands, because I don't think you and I are alone in why we dislike it. Because, frankly, we're in agreement that that is not the problem. Like, it being a demon is not the problem. It's that it happens so quickly and you have no time to really chew on it, and there's no... It just happens. Like, they could have done so much more to, like we just said it a few minutes ago. It's not the content of the ending as much as the way the information was given to the audience. I feel like I've said this on past episodes, but my philosophy about any kind of storytelling, whether it's books or whether it's movies or video games or whatever, a good storyteller knows how and when to reveal information to the audience. At what, and this is where you have storytellers. You mentioned Tarantino. He got famous for doing things out of order.
Yeah.
Like when you reveal information to people will make or break the story. You also see this with people who are bad at telling jokes. They don't have any comedic timing. Like, they'll tell a joke that people find funny, but they blow it.
Yeah.
That's what this is. This is not a bad joke. This is a bad joker. Because, again, you and I are in agreement that the double twist of it actually being a demon is good. Like, that's not the problem. It's just that it comes so quickly, and there's no, you don't even get to appreciate it. Like I said, even for horror fans, you don't get to see the kills. You don't even get to anticipate the kills. You don't get to see the monster, for that matter. You don't even get to see the Antichrist. This is basically cinematic blue balls for horror fans. Well, even if you like the demonic ending, that's not the problem. The problem is that there's nothing to enjoy about it. It's just a thing that happens, and then the movie's over.
Well, and I was just reading down towards some people's responses because this was originally posted 4 years ago. So there are a couple people that I'm reading that do agree they like the ending, or maybe they don't agree. They agree with the analysis, or if they don't, but they still like the ending. This person, the _Neverists, says, no, the main problem with the ending is that the ending comes out of nowhere and feels tonally and thematically like it's from a different film.
Yep.
And then somebody else said, where was this one? There was one that was really, really good that kind of described what's okay. Here we go. This person, adept juggernaut 9929 said, and I like this person. This is kind of how I felt about it. I know this thread is ancient, but the ending of the movie pissed me off. It had a potential and was building to be what I thought a poignant commentary on mental illness and shame within the Deep South, and how what is different from the normal expectations is perceived as demonic. It had the opportunity to do something different and with meaning, but it ruined it all with a slapstick absurdity of the ending. I just feel like it ruined the whole thing for me. Yeah, that's, I like that person, what that person said. And this last person said, D. Say Sari 1986 said, I think the film would have ended stronger had Nell just been driven crazy by what's happened to her. And if the filmmakers still want to have a crazy tryst, keep the gay friend reveal and then have the preacher discover Nell is pregnant by her brother and have a showdown with him at the end.
That's actually a good twist too.
Yeah, and
yeah,
someone said, they even said, I feel like this was foreshadowed in the film itself with the Nell does attack Caleb halfway through the movie. And may have possibly been how the original script ended, and the studio chickened out and added all the ridiculous satanic cult stuff. And finally, Fami XO of Power said sorry to Necro, which I guess is somebody else in here. But I've got the same feeling. It has the same rushed feeling to it as the theatrical ending to I Am Legend, and it reeks of studio interference.
Yeah, no, and that was something I was thinking about while we were talking about it. It felt... that's the thing, the ending feels really rushed. Like, when she meets the gay friend, or, the gay person she supposedly slept with, like, that felt like part of the actual movie.
Right.
And there's other things, like, it's weird, right? Because it does feel rushed, but then there's things about it that make it feel like it wasn't, or it was planned. Like, I love early in the film, like, when you go to her local church and there's that, nice, chubby old woman who,
right.
Oh, am I going to be in the movie? Am I in the movie? Like, the fact that she's there at the end... like, that feels like setup and payoff, where it's like, oh, what a sweet old woman, and then you find out she's like a Satanist. Like, that...
right.
That feels like that was in there intentionally.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, no, the brother, that's actually a great twist. They said it, like, she attacks him. There's also who's the first person who makes contact with them when they arrive. It's the brother. He says to go back where they came from.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, there's... It's too rushed. Like, that's the thing. I don't even have a problem with the demonic ending. The guy who started this whole thread. Yeah, the guy who started this whole thread, I agree with him. I don't think that the demon in itself is like a problem. I don't think that the ending is bad on its face. It's just, as I said, it's not a bad joke. It's a bad joker. The person, like, the way that the information was explained to the audience, the way it was revealed... the way it was revealed was good, and then it all just happens again. Like, the double twist when they're about to leave and they find out, like, they should have gone back to the church, maybe found like a secret basement or something, with like a pentagram. Like, there's so many ways that this could have been done better.
Like, I thought,
and it does make you wonder
when they go back, in the house, and they come back to the house, and then the house is covered with strange symbols and blood. I was like, oh no, she killed everybody and she's taken off in the woods. And I thought that's what it was going to be. It was going to be them running into her in the woods, and that was it. And that to me would have been creepy because she's already has an amazing performance, and it kind of puts, like, by her taking out the pastor in the town, and then, like, her father, that kind of would have been what a lot of, like, I call them depressing horror movies go to, is that there's no one that can stop her, sort of thing. I thought that would have been more interesting than what we got. Like I said, this just reminds me of, like, the Choco Chicken episode of the X-Files, where they find out there's a cult that's putting people in the local chicken supply. And the end of the episode literally looks like that.
Is it Choco or is it Choco? Because maybe they're making a joke about choking chicken in the X-Files.
Oh my God! Stop!
Just saying. Are you sure it's pronounced Choco?
I feel like I just feel like this movie just had so much promise and potential, and like I said, even though I still would have liked The Last Exorcism as a title, even if it turned out that ending that I thought we were going for, and what that person said, it was a commentary on mental illness and shame in like these, sheltered areas and these sheltered families. I thought that was really good. If they wanted the horror twist of it might being real at the end, they could still have the friend reveal. But other than that, I was kind of just like, come on now.
Absolutely. Well, so what would you give this film in by the end of it? How many pitchers of sweet tea would you give it?
I'm kind of torn because like the first 3/4 of it is like really good, or not, or even if it wasn't really good, it's just good. I would say, yeah, I would definitely say that would have been, but the ending kind of, and because I have to consider this as a full film, I would say 1.75 pitchers of sweet tea.
See, yeah, that's the problem. Is the ending is this is where it doesn't ruin it for me. Like I like that those themes are still present in the film, even though that's not what the ending is. And with it just being like 5 minutes out of the film, at least the rest of it has good entertainment value and some interesting twists, some solid performances. So not a great score for me, but I'm going to give it 2.5. And for anyone who is new to the show, we do a parody of Siskel and Ebert, who famously gave out scores out of 4 stars. So that's 1.75 out of 4 for T and 2.5 out of 4 for me. So, might not, it sounds low, which it kind of is, but it's not as low as you would think it is.
One other thing I want to say I liked about this is, it was a horror scary film that, it had a creepy atmosphere. It was good, but it didn't feel the need to oversell on gross out humor or gore, or not humor, horror or gore horror. And I do think that this is sort of, I did want to tell you this Easter egg that I noticed. You probably didn't notice this. The character of Nell in her bedroom has a portrait of Scarlett O'Hara on her wall.
Oh, maybe it's been a few days. I probably didn't notice it. I noticed a couple of posters on her wall. And maybe at the time I did notice it. I doubt it. But there was like a couple things I noticed on her wall.
It's like on the back wall when you walk in the room. It's even the one that he makes move back and forth when he's doing his fake exorcism. And I was like, I bet you whoever curated, the artwork for this didn't recognize the character for whatever reason, because that is the MGM that's the Selznick Gone with the Wind, which is still under copyright. So I don't think anyone's noticed it, but I'm like, it's pretty obvious what it is, and I don't think they had the budget to get that cleared.
That is funny. And yeah, it was probably, I bet they weren't thinking of that. The art department was probably just like, what would a little girl
they probably
from
just
the
went
South
to like
be
some
into?
thrift stores and like found some, a Southern girl would have this picture of this bell in her room. I could see that. Yeah,
they probably knew it was from Gone with the Wind, but like they probably didn't know that it was. Yeah, that is interesting. But yeah, I did notice some stuff in her. I remember when she's playing the flute, like I was looking in the background and I was noticing some stuff decorating her room. But what do you guys listening think? Did you like our found footage film fest, and would you like us to do another one? There's plenty of other films we could talk about. There's the famous Spanish film Quarantine that I know is another really popular one that a lot of people think are underrated. I came up with this idea because I know T specifically is not a huge fan of the genre, and I know you've been outspoken in thinking like Blair Witch is overrated. So
I thought I just think it's because I waited too long to see it,
Exactly.
Actually, I just had one more thought about this movie. They always put at the end of the movie, or at least I've noticed in found footage films, there's usually some way of how the tape or whatever was recovered. We don't get that with this movie. But canonically, there has to be some sort of major release or something within the universe of this project, because they added music to it. Specifically, when they're driving back home, they put on, the feel-good guitar sound, and that's not like on the radio or something. So
it's
in
one
the
of
universe,
the
it
flaws
was
of
released
this
somehow or discovered.
Yeah, it's one of the flaws of this film. It's something I was thinking of when I was watching it too, because Blair Witch Project, no music, except for the bit where it's like their documentary on the witch at the beginning of the movie. But then the rest of the movie is no music. It just feels like someone's like creepy. It found footage. It's from the name. Creep, which we reviewed last time. We do have the context. The killer himself has the tape,
Yep.
and he puts it on his shelf after he's done recording. Paranormal Activity, we know. I believe like there was some mythos on like how it was recovered and why it was in theaters and yada yada yada. Like, they did think of that. And it is something that is important in this genre. Like, you do kind of want to have an explanation, especially if you're doing the whole, ooh, it's found footage. Like, well, okay, but how are we seeing it?
Right. I mean, I was totally fine with it kind of just existing sort of just in the realm. Like, I don't know if this makes sense to you, but it's like, even if it wasn't technically recovered, like basically saying this tape existed somewhere at some time. I was fine with it, but the fact that they added music to it, I was like, okay, that means this was found somehow. I mean, it's like, and maybe I'm being nitpicky, but when you pick found footage, that using found footage as a format is a storytelling device. You chose that for a reason. So
no, and that is the problem, because it was in the context of the movie, it's a professional documentary being made. So if it's treated as if it was a finished documentary. But that is the problem. It's like, okay, well, did the cult finish it? Because they would have had the footage. So did they add the music? Like, why would they even bother? Wouldn't they just burn it? So, like, it's one of those things where you do have to think about it. The Blair Witch Project had a little title card at the beginning explaining that this was found in the woods. Like, it's something to think about. Like, other found footage films might have music and stuff added, but it's like, oh, this was completed to the best of the filmmaker's ability after it was found and yada yada yada. Like, again, Paranormal Activity is a very like well put together, higher budgeted. The first one was like no money, but they came up with like a whole mythology behind it, and they even got creative where the sequels, the second one was like at the same time as the first one, and then the third one was like from the early or like late 80s, and it's like really old VHS tapes. It's like, but it is something, if you're going to do a found footage, quote unquote, you do need to think of like, okay, well, what is the context of the audience seeing this? Because even though at this point all audiences know it's fake, like that's part of the fun of doing a movie like this, is you need to come up with a story of why they're watching it. And you're absolutely right. That is something that is part of it's. But again, like for me, it's like the ending. It's something you think about when you realize it, but it doesn't really like ruin the movie. It's just something that I guess they just
that didn't ruin
really
the movie for me. It's just more of while we're talking about flaws.
The one, so like a perfect example of just not thinking about anything and just having it be awful. I think I've mentioned this in the past, but one time way back in the day, before Netflix was what it was now, and they had just tons of famous movies and random movies on Netflix to watch, I saw like a found footage Amityville horror movie where it's like a family moved into the house and it's like security footage or whatever, but it's just so lazy. Like, it is clearly not the Amityville house because it's so iconic looking. Like, the exterior, it's just like some random suburban house.
Yeah.
And it's like stuff like that where it's like, no, this actually does ruin the movie because it doesn't feel even kind of real. And they don't even acknowledge it doesn't look like the house. Like, that's really bad. But no, you're right. Didn't ruin the movie, but it is something worth mentioning. But what do you guys listening think? Should we do another found footage film fest? Huh?
Did you guys love the ending and we're wrong?
Yeah, no, feel free. Anyone who likes the ending, go ahead. If you're listening to this on YouTube Music, just leave us a really long-winded, angry comment. We totally will respond.
And we'll most likely read the whole thing.
No, but yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. We do have anime coming up next time. Unfortunately, we're only able to do one episode, but we're doing we're doing sort of a double review. I'm sure some of you are going to be pleasantly surprised what we're talking about on top of the film. But until next time, I've been Whiskey.
And I've been Sweet Tea.
Keeping it Kino.
And suck it Scorsese.
See you guys next time.
Bye, all. Reels on the Rocks is a production of La Prince Laboratories. It is edited and produced by Alejandro Castillo and features original artwork by Asa Esparza and original music by Pat Mars. Follow us on Twitter at Reels on the Rocks and tweet at us with any movies or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future.